Most Assassin's Creed protagonists get one story. Ezio Auditore da Firenze got 3 full games watching him lose his father and brothers, then spend decades trying to make that loss mean something. He aged from Assassin's Creed 2 through Brotherhood and Revelations, all the way to Embers, where he finally put down the blade. That's why today I'm breaking down the 8 reasons Ezio stands as the greatest protagonist in the series and what makes his story so complete. Starting with the promise that changes everything about how we watch him grow. Complete 3-game arc. Video games use different sequel structures. Sometimes the same hero continues, and sometimes the sequel shifts to a new protagonist. Ezio Auditore gets a whole life. That's a distinctive storytelling choice, and one the series makes unusually personal. Think about the range of ways video game protagonists can work. Some arrive already capable, some grow dramatically, and some stories end with room for a sequel. Ezio doesn't get that mercy, and he doesn't need it. Across Assassin's Creed II, Brotherhood, and Revelations, spanning a fictional timeline that stretches from his reckless 20s in Florence to his weathered 50s in Constantinople, you watch one man actually age, in judgment, in body, in the questions he even bothers asking anymore. He starts as a noble who cares more about brawls and women than politics. By the end of the second game, he's lost multiple members of his family. Brotherhood places him in a role he now has to carry. Leader of the Brotherhood, the guy responsible for other people's lives instead of just his own. Revelations sends him east, older than before, chasing not a personal enemy but Altair's legacy, a man's answers instead of a man's blood. And then Embers finishes the job. It gives Ezio's story a proper conclusion. It shows him retired, married, and then, at 65, he suffers a heart attack and dies in a Florence market square. That's the whole shape of a person. They're grouped as the Ezio trilogy for a reason. It's a distinctive stretch of this franchise where you don't just play a mission, you watch a life happen. Every ending needs a beginning. His story is rooted in his family's downfall and the loss of his family at a young age. Revenge turned purpose Florence, 1476. Ezio Auditore is 17 years old, watching from a crowd as his father and 2 brothers are hanged in the town square on a treason charge that was part of a conspiracy against his family. That's the wound much of Ezio's early story gets built around, and Assassin's Creed 2 sets that wound at the heart of Ezio's arc, then follows him as he grows beyond revenge. What follows is a teenager with a list of names, chasing an education he never asked for. The people on that list answer to someone bigger. Vieri dei Pazzi's assassination is framed as the beginning of Ezio's path of vengeance, because he's fighting for his blood, not a cause. Francesco Pazzi, Jacopo Pazzi, Uberto Alberti, the family friend who signed the execution order himself. The campaign gradually reveals another layer of the conspiracy until the trail stops looking like a list of guilty men and starts looking like a map of the Templar Order. That map ends in Rome, in a chapel, with Rodrigo Borgia bleeding out under Ezio's blade. This is the moment the whole arc has been building toward, the revenge finally within reach, the man responsible finally beaten. Ezio doesn't finish him. Killing you won't bring my family back. 7 words, and the entire premise of vengeance collapses in the space it takes to say them. That's the hinge. His father and brothers are still dead. Rodrigo dying doesn't change that arithmetic, and Ezio knows it's standing over him. What grows out of that failure is a different kind of purpose, one built on protecting a brotherhood instead of settling a debt. By the time he's old, he's guarding recruits he's never met, cities he didn't grow up in, a creed he inherited by accident. The grief from that square in Florence remains an important part of his story. It just stops being the only thing driving him forward. His family remains the source of the fire, while purpose becomes the direction. Anger got him through Venice and Rome. It won't get him through what comes next. The slow, unglamorous work of becoming someone other people are willing to follow. Untrained noble to mentor. Ezio Auditore starts this story as a rich kid with soft hands, chasing women through Florence and settling scores with his fists, and by August of 1503 he's mentor of the Italian Brotherhood of Assassins. That gap is the whole point. Nobody hands you that kind of authority for free. Before 1476, Ezio's life revolves around a rival family and a bruised ego. Then his father and brothers hang in the Piazza della Signoria, and Ezio discovers that his family had kept its assassin heritage from him. His uncle Mario pulls back the curtain on the Brotherhood, and the noble boy, now drawn into the assassin world, begins training to fight and defeat the Templars after witnessing the executions of the family members he watched die. That training doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't happen because someone hands him a manual. He earns it the same way anyone earns a dangerous skill. Badly at first, then less badly, then well enough that people stop worrying about him and start relying on him. By the time Assassin's Creed 2 closes, he's formally initiated into the Order, standing where the outsider who stumbled into a secret war used to stand. Initiation is the entry fee for a much harder job. Command works differently than combat. Combat asks whether you survive the fight in front of you. Command asks whether the people you send somewhere else can carry out the fight you can't see, because your decisions can affect the apprentices following them. Ezio becomes mentor of the Italian assassins right after the campaign in Rome. The available summaries place that promotion in 1503. That promotion isn't handed out for being the best swordsman in Italy. Plenty of assassins can fight, and Ezio's record also includes rebuilding the ranks and leading the Italian Brotherhood. Ezio's climb from newly initiated assassin to institutional leader tracks the exact arc this whole story keeps circling back to. A man who once only reacted to the world now has to shape it on purpose. The boy who once reacted to danger becomes the person responsible for preparing others to face it. He spends nearly 3 decades getting there, from a street brawl in Florence to a command role in the Italian Brotherhood. Over time, that journey takes him from the noble kid who started it toward leadership in the Italian Brotherhood. Authority creates a new problem. Every victory now depends on how many people can move with him. Shaping the modern Brotherhood. Ezio recruited and trained a new generation of assassin apprentices, and he barely had time to grieve his own family while doing it. Rome under the Borgia is a leash. Borgia towers and their captains keep control over the city's 5 districts. Into that city walks an experienced assassin who has already buried a father, 2 brothers, and many enemies, and who now has to build something bigger than himself out of the wreckage those deaths left behind. He starts small. Ezio finds civilians the Borgia have threatened or ruined. Thieves, mercenaries, courtesans, people with grievances and skills nobody else wanted, and he gives them a purpose within the assassin order. He trains them personally. He promotes the ones who prove themselves. He hands them equipment and sends them into the field, and what began as one man's private mission slowly turns into a personnel pipeline, one that makes Ezio responsible for lives beyond his own. Think about what that actually means for someone whose family was shattered when the Templars executed them. The recruits Ezio trains and sends into the field become part of the Brotherhood's chance to outlast him. The scale is the part that should stop you. Trained assassins in this network patrol Roman rooftops. Sure, that part is expected, but they also take contracts that stretch across Europe, which means the Italian Brotherhood Ezio rebuilt in Rome is now operating on a continental map. Recruitment, training, promotion, deployment, contracts running across Europe from Rome itself. This is infrastructure full stop, and infrastructure outlives the person who designs it. Sit with this one for a second. The Brotherhood. You see functioning smoothly generations later, with cells and hierarchies and specialists slotted into place, resembles the system Ezio built in Rome closely enough that calling it coincidence takes real effort. The evidence for what he did in his own city is strongest when it comes to recruitment, training, and deployment. How much of every later Brotherhood traces back to his blueprint specifically is a thinner claim. One worth flagging as a reach rather than a fact, but the pattern he established, recruit people from Rome, train them, trust them with real operations, reappears in the network Ezio built across the network Ezio built from Rome. Leadership, it turns out, was never just about being the best fighter in the room. It was about making sure the room kept fighting when you weren't standing in it anymore. A living institution still needs a human spark, though. Something no amount of infrastructure can manufacture on its own. Ezio finds a new ally for the Brotherhood, Leonardo da Vinci. Some of the most distinctive weapons in Ezio's arsenal come from Leonardo da Vinci, whose role here is as an inventive ally rather than a soldier. Ezio meets him in December 1476, the same month he witnesses his father and 2 brothers being hanged in the Piazza della Signoria. At that point, Ezio is grieving, and he has codex pages that Leonardo can decode. Leonardo becomes an inventive ally who helps Ezio with his equipment. He sits down with Altair's pages and decodes them. That's not a minor plot device. That's Altair's personal journal, handed back to Ezio through one Florentine painter with a genuine soft spot for a traumatized 17-year-old. Ezio wears Altair's ideas and fires them. Leonardo gives him a hidden gun and decodes codex-related upgrades. At least some of Ezio's most memorable equipment comes from Leonardo, not a shop transaction. And it stays personal. Ezio keeps returning to Leonardo for help with codex pages and equipment, and their collaboration feels personal rather than purely transactional. Some players read real intimacy into their scenes together, but the material cited here does not establish an explicit confirmation of a romantic or sexual relationship. The evidence provided here leaves that question unresolved, and the friendship works fine without the label. Their friendship is tested when Leonardo is drawn into Cesare Borgia's war. In Brotherhood, Leonardo develops war machines for Cesare Borgia, and instead of staying silent, he starts feeding Ezio the schematics, a friend on the other side of a war he never wanted to be part of. Through Leonardo's help, Ezio gains access to information from Altair's codex. A friendship like that only means something if the man holding onto it can survive what the relationships in his life are about to demand of him. Supporting cast. An 18-year-old boy who fumbles his first assassination in Florence has no business becoming the man who rebuilds the Roman Brotherhood, and the distance between those two people is measured in the friends and family who dragged him there, step by step, year by year. Mario Auditore is one of the reasons. Ezio's uncle hands him a hidden blade, a fortress in Monteriggioni, and the blunt, practical education that trains him to work as an assassin, teaching him not to become like the men he hunts. His younger sister Claudia starts the series as a girl he has to protect and ends it running a brothel, the Rosa in Fiore, which she takes over jointly with her mother Maria. That is a family growing into the same calling, at the same time carrying the same losses and coming out the other side as partners instead of protector and protected. Then Rome arrives and the relationships shift from blood to strategy. Niccolò Machiavelli is involved as Ezio helps rebuild the Italian Brotherhood, and the two men respect each other as Ezio re-establishes relationships between his assassin guild and the city's other guilds. Cristina Vespucci belongs to the boy Ezio used to be, a love affair from Florence that Brotherhood revisits through repressed memories, already gone by the time he is old enough to know what he lost. Sofia Sardor belongs to the man he becomes, a bookseller in Constantinople who has no idea she is falling for a legend, and marries him anyway, legend and all. Together, these people ask Ezio to show up in different ways. Mario asks for a student. Claudia asks for a protector who eventually has to let go. Machiavelli asks for a leader who can take criticism without drawing a blade on the person offering it. Sofia asks Ezio for something different from the life he has been living. The older Ezio eventually faces a relationship with the past itself, one that remains with him through the losses he carries along the way, carrying a question that reaches beyond any living companion. Altair's legacy. Ezio spends a major mission in Revelations hunting a treasure that turns out to be a corpse. That is the promise of the Masyaf key storyline, and it is a lie of framing rather than a lie of fact. 5 seals, recovered across Constantinople from the Yerebatin cistern, the Galata Tower, the Forum of the Ox, and Maiden's Tower, serve as the keys that lead Ezio to Masyaf, forming a trail that feels instantly familiar to any treasure hunter. Ezio, now in his 50s and still climbing towers like a man half his age, follows that trail the way he followed every trail before it. He follows the keys toward whatever Altair's library has kept hidden. What he finds under Masyaf is a man who has been dead for centuries, sitting in a library he built as both a vault and a grave. Altair ibn Lahad sealed himself in that library with an apple of Eden, and the final memory seal was still in his hand when Ezio arrived, centuries after Altair's death. Think about what that means for a second. An assassin who, at the end of his life, chose to keep that kind of power out of the wrong hands, chose at the very end to seal it inside the library, after sealing himself in with the apple, trusting that someone would eventually come looking. In Revelations, Ezio never meets Altair in the flesh. He learns Altair's story through memory rather than through a conversation. And yet this can be one of the trilogy's most intimate moments. One man's whole life handed to another man through memory alone. Across centuries, neither of them could bridge in person. Some players read Revelations as the game where Ezio's own story gets crowded out by a ghost. It's a fair complaint on the surface, and the pacing invites it. But look at what Ezio actually does once he understands what he's found. He leaves the apple behind in Altair's library rather than taking it with him. He absorbs Altair's burden the way he once absorbed his father's death and his uncle's mentorship, folding it into everything he already carries, and then he lets it go, walking out of that library lighter rather than crowned. The brotherhood he built in Rome, the family he'd been assembling one relationship at a time, means nothing if he can't also decide what not to carry forward. Inheriting a legend and repeating it are two different acts, and only one of them counts as wisdom. When a man lays another life to rest, the world around him decides whether that farewell keeps echoing. Enduring popularity. Put Ezio Auditore in a room against Geralt, Lara Croft, Jill Valentine, Arthur Morgan, and Agent 47, and he walks out the winner. That happened in a Gaming Bible reader poll asking readers to choose the most popular video game character of all time, and Ezio came out on top. Game Informer readers separately voted him third in a reader's top 30 character ranking covering characters created from 2000 to the present. Games Radar Plus placed him 8th on a list of the most memorable, influential, and outright badass characters gaming has ever put on screen. Guinness World Records slotted him 35th among the most popular video game characters alive, and the Spike Video Game Awards nominated him for Character of the Year. The evidence here comes from several different polls, rankings, and recognitions, rather than one single measure of greatness, so the case stays a pattern rather than a verdict, but the pattern draws on reader voting, rankings, an awards body, and a record-keeping institution. And it keeps resurfacing years after his trilogy ended, with Ezio later appearing in a Games Radar Plus ranking. Fans of Edward Kenway will tell you that his story is built around a very different kind of adventure. Fans of Bayek will tell you that his story takes a very different emotional path. Fans of Cassandra and Altair have their own arguments to make, and honestly those arguments can all be fair as matters of personal taste, because the crown here is subjective, built from taste rather than a single scoreboard. What keeps Ezio surfacing anyway, in fan polls and later rankings, is that one possible reason to remember him is the scale of his entire arc, rather than just one mission, one betrayal, or one killer line. He's being remembered as the reckless boy who buried his father and 2 brothers and then built his life around the consequences of those deaths. The young man who traded a normal Florentine life for a hood and a blade. The leader who rebuilt a broken brotherhood from scattered survivors. The son who forgave his own father's killer instead of feeding the cycle. And the old man who let go of a legacy that never belonged to him in the first place. Call back to that decision in the archives. It wasn't a quiet housekeeping choice, it was the last proof that his story was actually finished, and that's part of the case for why this character remains worth remembering years and multiple sequels later. Can a protagonist stay compelling after the revenge is done, the wars are won, and the career has ended? Ezio is the answer, standing there with a receipt for it. He remains my choice for the Greatest Assassins Creed Protagonist because the section brings every one of those milestones into the same character arc. From the reckless Florentine youth chased through rooftops by his father's executioners, to the retired assassin walking a quiet Italian road in embers, finally allowed to just be tired. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.